This is, yeah. Oh, I thought Cordelia was brilliant to remember her presentation so well. I didn't. Good morning, everybody. I'm really delighted to be here. There we go. And as you see, I'm here with a number of hats on, but one of them is I chair the South East Nature Partnership. But my main sort of career has been a GP. So I'm looking at the whole kind of engagement with nature issue through a health lens. I thought to be a bit about that. I'm just going to tell you a bit about the South East Nature Partnership, because I know a lot of people in this room are connected with it in some shape or form. So just a few words on that. So overall, we're trying to have a joined up approach across the South East to the climate, health and nature crises. Those things are all in crisis, unfortunately, and we also have a war in Europe, rampant inflation, a healthcare system that's on its knees, nurses going on strike and so on. I could go on and on. But on this Armistice Day, I think it's appropriate to remember that we have faced big challenges in the past and overcome them. And I hope this will be a hopeful talk about some of the ways forward in overcoming challenges we face. And I think nature is at the heart of that. And connection with nature is at the heart of the solutions to these multiple large problems we face. So just to show you the geography at the moment of the South East Nature Partnership, covers Essex, Oxfordshire, as well as the kind of Hampshire, Kent, Surrey, Sussex, South East. So we're quite a big partnership, and obviously in terms of our local nature recovery strategies and things, we want to be able to ensure that they don't separate by county borders, but we follow natural geological and rivers and so on, a coastline that all joins up together. Nature isn't really separated into physical boundaries like we like to create. So it's a joined up approach, strategic, engaging many, many partners. As you can see on the right of the slide, a large number of partners, including this MENA NHS programme, which is really beginning to see the value of nature as a health sort of asset. So the overall aim of the South East Nature Partnership is to facilitate nature recovery actively, and that is underpinning a healthy economy, healthy community, and a thriving natural environment. All those things need to work together, and it's about people and nature. And it's a truism, but it just needs worth reminding everybody that we are actually nature ourselves. It isn't a separate, it's one of those dualities that has got into our subconscious, that somehow human and nature are two different things. But we're not, we're all part and parcel, we need each other, and the reciprocity is a really critical part of this. I'm just a bit worried about the sound. Is it going on and off? Or it's me. Yeah, I don't know whether to go nearer or it might be driving you mad if it's going on and off, but is that better now? Great, I'll lean forward. So none of this is new. About 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates said that nature itself is the best physician. So we knew nature was good for health then. We've kind of forgotten it, but we're rediscovering this exciting news, and a lot of research has come behind that. And it's really quite obvious in a way, because we know that exercise, fresh air, all those things are really important for health, and that forever. But it's how do you do that in a way that is beneficial to human health and beneficial to the natural environment. And that's a lot of what we've heard about in the previous talk as well. Both have got to benefit, not one at the expense of the other. So I'm going to put my glasses on here. So this talk will cover some aspects of the medical model and how that needs to change, some of the evidence, the role of green social prescribing in helping people re-engage and reconnect, and other sort of solutions to some of the problems we face. And just to remind people, some of the figures from here come from the recently published State of Nature report for Kent, and some of them are more national and international figures, but just to remind people that nature is in a serious state of crisis. We know 1 million species worldwide may disappear in the coming years, and as Paul said earlier, you know, this is an emergency. We have to put this as a top priority in our strategic thinking as a world and as a nation. And in the UK, we're not immune from this trend at all. 1 in 7 species are facing imminent extinction. And this is, remember, only the stuff we know about. There are all sorts of species we don't even know exist or have named, who also may be in trouble and have huge value for our futures. So we know to survive the future changing climate, or the current changing climate, as I should say, and people always talk about it in the future, but we are at the moment in climate change. This is a very hot November. We've all noticed my vegetables are all sort of re-harvesting in November, which is rather unusual. I don't ever remember that before. And just to allude to the great Sir David Attenborough briefly, he stated, you cannot care about something you have never got to know or understood or connected with. Better words than me, but that's roughly what he stated. And that is so true. A lot of people's lives are not in any way connected with the natural world, and many children live most of their lives indoors now, up to 95% indoors, which I think is a tragedy of our day. We also know that health is declining. We've obviously just come through a major pandemic, and that may not have happened if we had a better relationship with our natural environment. Some experts believe that. We know that mental health, though physical health has improved in general over the last few decades, mental health has actually declined, particularly in children and young people. And part of that decline is due to eco-anxiety, an increasing number of studies about that in teenagers particularly, worrying about a livable future. But also many other aspects of health are being affected. Our musculoskeletal systems suffer from this sitting in front of computers or driving vehicles and not moving our bodies as they're meant to be moved. Obviously, obesity and diabetes are a major part of our declining health, and declining, unfortunately, our life expectancy is going a little bit backwards now. Also we have a lot of long-term conditions, which is kind of a success that we manage to treat them and they don't cause mortality, but people are living with more and more conditions, therefore having difficulties getting around, enjoying their lives. And this has messages for access to nature as well. I echo the point made in the questions earlier about nature's got to be on everyone's doorstep, definitely. And that helps with the access issue, but also the connection, the understanding, the observation through the seasons and so on. Socioeconomically, we're now seeing massive inflation. We're having a lot of people who are hungry and not able to feed their families. This obviously is going to be a much bigger, and not housing themselves as well. That's obviously, thinking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, it's going to be a bigger priority in people's mind than maybe vanishing species or climate change. So it creates a different sort of sense of urgency. And the widening inequalities don't help anybody at all. So I'm going to talk a tiny bit about the brain. Our brains are very important parts of our bodies, but they are nevertheless part of our physical body. And there is no difference between the brain and the rest of the body. So if your body is healthy, your brain is likely to be more healthy. If your brain is unhealthy for whatever reason, your body is likely to be more unhealthy. So one of the things tackling health and improving mental health in particular is we also need to have healthy bodies. The old-fashioned mens sana incorporated sani, I think it was, a healthy mind and a healthy body, is absolutely true. Again, this is part of the duality, you know, is man separate from nature, or is the mind separate from the body? These things are totally untrue, but they've kind of crept into our collective subconscious as an idea. Somehow we don't need to look after our minds particularly in the same way as we look after our bodies. So what does nature do to help us? This is an old study, so none of this is, you know, we've known all this stuff for quite a while. But we have two sort of types of attention, broadly speaking, and the involuntary one is sort of nice and relaxed and free-floating, as I call it. You see a butterfly, a bee, or a cloud in the sky with an interesting shape. Feel the wind on your skin and notice it. And that's what you get a lot of involuntary attention in nature, which is restorative to stress, helps concentration, relaxes the mind, freedom, as we heard earlier. And obviously the voluntary attention that I'm using right now, or trying to, and most of us use most of the time in our work, or when we're cooking a meal, say, is much more focused, and it uses up our brain energy a lot. So that is the problem that modern lifestyles creating a lot of mental health issues, because we're doing too much of the voluntary and not enough involuntary. So we want to be able to build in that involuntary attention in our everyday lives, just a little walk to work in the morning or something of that sort, where you can just let the mind go free. Very important. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about nature connection as opposed to engagement. I think it's a really important distinction, connection. And Miles Richardson at the University of Derby has done a lot of the work on this. I'm sure some of you will know his work. But it's about feeling part of nature, that actual proper connection, which is what we are, but a lot of people don't feel it. And that correlates with life satisfaction, vitality, you can read it on the slide, I hope, meaningfulness, happiness, all the things we want, lower anxiety. It also, if you measure the impact, reduces your blood pressure, stress levels, adrenaline and so on, and improves all aspects of your health, your mental health. And this nature connection is something that is not quite the same as just being in nature or learning about birds or connecting in that sort of way. There is an emotional element to it, which I've tried to illustrate in this lovely picture, getting close, getting involved, getting engaged. I'm sure all of you will recognise that. There's also compassion in that. And I think this is really important to try and think about, because where have we gone wrong as a society is perhaps in the extractive, exploitative sense of the natural environment. And to rediscover that compassion and engagement is really, really important. Now, some of the things that are happening in your body, and the science has shown us when you go out into nature, well, obviously the obvious one is exercise. We all know exercise is good for us, and that produces endorphins, which are natural painkillers. So if you, say, had a chronic back problem or any other joint problem, a little walk will help that, whether it's indoors or outdoors. The exercise will help. Fresh air, because we don't always realise that this room is full of lovely wood, it's a beautiful building, but a lot of homes are full of plastic and toxic chemicals come off a lot of the products in the home, not just plastics, but things like sofa coverings and things. And we're suffering a lot of the time from mild indoor air pollution, particularly in the winter when all the windows are shut and things. So getting outside, breathing that fresh air, that's going to be good for your health. Vitamin D, we all know the lovely sunshine vitamin. We don't get enough of it in the UK. We will need to get outside more when the sun is shining. Really important. And of course, often you can't for various reasons, and children are stuck in classrooms and things, indoors. So, and serotonin, the happiness hormone released in the brain when you're out in nature. Soil bacteria, Mycobacterium vapor, giving off soil bacterium are good for your health. There's this lovely sense of smell you get from wet earth when you turn the soil, and that's known as petrichor, and it does all sorts of wonderful things to your body and your mind and your immune system. Great stuff. Now, all ages, all conditions benefit from contact with nature, particularly if it's connection, proper connection. And our knowledge on this is evolving and new. A lot of it is new and argued about, not fully understood. But that we know that all conditions, the only exception maybe might be hay fever and things like that, but we do also know that allergies are less likely if you're exposed to nature at an early age. There'll be less of them. We're getting more allergies all the time, by the way. So interactions with nature that we have, for example, the phytoncides, when we go in a forest or woodland, the trees communicate with each other through these compounds called phytoncides, but they also make us feel good. So a lot of people report that a forest is a better place, you know, if they're having their walk in a woodland, they feel better than maybe on a big open field. They're both are nice, both are good. And T-cell immunity was on the news this morning, the importance of that in cancer, but T-cell immunity is important for all kinds of things, particularly meeting bacteria or new agents like COVID-19 when it was new. Our only defense is our T-cell immunity. Keeping that healthy is good, and getting outside helps your T-cells in a big way, getting in contact with nature. The theory of the green mind came from the University of Essex, Professor Jules Pretty. If anybody wants to look that up, it's really interesting. It's a balance of the parasympathetic nervous system with the sympathetic nervous system, and it's a bit like that, directed in voluntary and involuntary attention. It's a balance between two types of systems in the body. One is fight or flight and anxiety, and the other one is calm, cool, mindful, chilled. And getting that balance right is beneficial if you're in nature a lot. And we understand a lot more about trauma, on the impact of trauma on the brain. And trauma is very prevalent, sadly, in our society. And trying to heal that, we need to understand the correct neurosequencing using the basal brain things first. Smell, rhythm, balance, all in your basal brain, and then it goes up to the cortex in stages. So healing using nature needs a neurosequencing approach. We're also beginning to learn a lot more about the gut microbiome, which is billions of little creatures, more creatures in us than our own bodies in terms of weight, apparently. And these creatures are in a healthy balance if we have regular contact with nature. So your digestion, your gut, where your insides work, does depend on nature. And we're also learning a lot more about the mycelium, the fungal network in the soil, which is also in our lovely bodies. So a lot more going on than I knew as a young GP, but I still knew that nature was good for you. Anyway, this study just illustrates the point that if you take a group of mental health patients and go for a walk of a given distance in nature, and you take the same group and go for a walk in a shopping centre, same distance, the exercise content is the same. The environment's completely different. So when they come out of the nature walk, their self-esteem is right up here. When they come out of the shopping centre, their self-esteem has gone down. Leave you to work out why you think that might happen, but it's an interesting finding. So we need to change the way we do medicine in order to benefit nature and human health. And for that, we need to rethink our medical model for complex, multifactorial problems, which are usually a mixture of social, psychological, and biological issues going on all at once in the same person. We need a different model. A pill or a chat with a therapist isn't going to address all that. So the medical model is changing, as with green social prescribing, but it's changing perhaps a bit too slowly. And this is where I attitudes to health, personal responsibility for health, and how you look after yourself and your family all comes into this debate. Also, we need to change the whole relationship of society to nature and to each other. If we abuse, bully, or exploit each other, we will probably abuse, bully, and exploit nature as well. So it's about an attitudinal thing. And so therapeutically, you can engage in this and try and develop the reciprocity and mutual respect that we all need with the natural environment, which we absolutely depend on. And of course that would feed into political priorities, because if the whole of society started thinking a bit differently in this way, they would vote a bit differently maybe and get politicians who put nature front and centre of our political objectives, where it should be. And similarly, our economic model would have to change. So all of that is so easy, isn't it? There's just not much to do on that list. It's all going to be done in the next month or two. Unfortunately, that's not the case, but we can keep working on it. And I think more nature connection for more people is a really good first step. Proper connection. We mentioned barriers just in the previous talk, and barriers are a thing. Now, when people talk about access, they think about cars and buses and wheelchairs and gates and things. But I would say a lot of the barriers are access in here, in this important thing called the brain. And how can we alter that? Well, there's understanding, there's looking at the perceived dangers. I've got grandchildren, go to school, friends come home to my house, and they don't want to walk in long grass, they're scared. They don't want to go near a spider, they're scared. Their mums have told them, to wash their hands every time they touch a leaf or a bit of grass. So there's a lot of internalised fears about the natural world, partly justified and partly exaggerated fears, which in some cases lead to severe phobias, not going outside and so on. These are really big barriers in the mind. I can talk about many people who never go outside at all, and therefore they're socially isolated and so on. So these are big things, and cultural issues, some of which are almost unconscious, we don't know we've got, but we have developed cultural issues that are barriers to accessing and appreciating and enjoying nature. I'm just showing you this slide on the roaming study that's now about nearly 30 years old, actually. But it shows the change that has gone in 4 generations between roaming outside. A modern child, I don't think the modern child of today is getting even 275 metres roaming. I'd be surprised if they get 10 metres roaming. They're not allowed out of your sight for 1 minute. So roaming is a child running off, doing what I did, and going off, doing what they felt like in the woods or wherever. And that is a very rare thing for the modern child. So what is that saying to the child? That it's a dangerous world out there. You can't go more than a few inches from your door without somebody accompanying you. And of course you can't discover for yourself some of the joyous things that are out there. And it's a tragedy, but we've absorbed this into our culture in the name of safety. But there is always a price for that kind of safety. We've lost a lot as well. So, what can we do to harness nature for health? Make it easy for people, make it part of their everyday life. That's really important. Walking, cycling, riding routes near to everybody. So this is the planners, designers, local authorities. Allotments. Ooh, does that mean I've run out of time? Sorry. I'll try and speed up. Allotments, why haven't we all got access? There's all waiting lists in my parish. I think in every parish, everyone should have an allotment who wants one. The statistics on space and gardens, really important. If people don't have a garden or anywhere for their children to play outside, that's a massive loss for their whole life. And we should be making them available to people. There's plenty of land we could do. Green social prescribing, I'm going to talk a bit more about. Education, we've got the GCSE and ecology, but we need a lot more education at primary, secondary, university level for everyone to understand all this properly and therefore build it into their role as a teacher maybe or an employer. Workplace can do a lot, get people outside, walk and talk, etc., instead of meetings always indoors. And obviously engaging local communities, getting them owning a project, a community orchard, a community garden. That is very, very powerful as well. There's a lot of green social prescribing in Kent. I'm giving you some of the examples on this slide. There are many more now. This is 2 or 3 years old, this slide, and I wouldn't be able to fit them all in. And we're all working together now as green social prescribers, forming a network and making it easier for referrers and so on. Very important to get this health and nature agenda into the mainstream of health. And the ICSs are all up for it. The Greener NHS programme is all up for it. It's just a matter of making it all happen. This is a quick case study on the charity that I'm obviously dear to my heart because I founded it as a GP, frustrated with the lack of service for children who've suffered a trauma, abuse and neglect. Just think of those words, trauma, abuse and neglect, what's happened to our natural environment. And it happens to our children. So we do this to each other and we're doing it to our world around us. How can we actually undo that thinking? And it's through, Dandelion Time works through nature reconnection. Started that model not really understanding what we were doing 20 years ago, and it's been very successful. And our approach involves the whole family in nature and also doing craft activities, animals, caring for animals, making things, artistic and so on. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I just wanted to say that nature connection involves time, space, addressing the mood that you're in before you start, as it were. You can't connect if you're in the wrong mood. Addressing fears and allowing the senses to become attuned to what's going on around you. So eyes, ears, touch, smell, all our senses, all involved, and building relationships. I know you're going to have a talk about dogs and later, but I think it's really important to have had a relationship of some sort with a creature other than a human in your experience in order to get a nature connection. And I think this picture just illustrates how that is an emotional, compassionate relationship, and helps for people recovering trauma. It helps them to have that nurturing experience. It's really important. And this slide just illustrates the complexity of what we do at Dandelion Time. It reflects the complexity of what's going on in people's lives. We had a good slide on that earlier as well, that people have all sorts of different motivations, reasons, priorities, fears, concerns in their lives. So you have to provide, in this new medical model that I'm trying to put forward, a variety of options and ways of doing things to get better. And you can read a bit more about it if you're interested on our website, as shown on there. You can also read a lot in very good books. These are just 3 that I've read fairly recently, but there are lots out there which give you a lot more detail of the connection between nature and health, and some of the personal journeys like The Wild Remedy I recommend very strongly. It's a beautiful book, as are the others. And so thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.